as you grow in responsibility, and many of us do, you have to find ways to prioritize things. And for me, you have to look way, way in advance. And I think doing a marathon, locking in to do a marathon, is not unlike locking in to study for the Master Sommelier exam. You've got to carve out time.
Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, your host, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the U.S. market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests in every episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned from the episode. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us this week to learn more about the U.S. market. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Master Sommelier Bobby Stuckey to the Italian Wine Podcast. For those of you who don't know Bobby, he began his distinguished career in restaurants in his home state of Arizona, working his way up from dishwasher to management, establishing his position as one of the leaders in the hospitality industry. After stints at the Little Nell and the French Laundry, Bobby opened his first venture, Frasca, in 2004 in Boulder, Colorado. The same year, he reached his Master Sommelier diploma. In 2007, he launched Scarpetta Wines with a focus on white wines from Friuli. He is also a marathon runner and cyclist, and his workout and routines and lifestyle have been featured in publications such as The Daily Beast and more. Bobby, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so honored, and thanks so much.
Absolutely. So before we dive into today's topic around health and wine, tell us a little bit more about the work you do with your restaurants in Colorado and also about your project with Scarpetta in Italy.
I'm an interesting person, interesting because my day job is actually a night job. I run the Frasca Hospitality Group with my management team, and I'm the founder of that. We're 20 years in, currently with 5 restaurants and about 250 employees. But I choose to be, the head of the company, but I do that by 5 nights a week minimum being on the floor with my team. So not everyone who chooses to run a company like that stays involved in service as much. Last night I was the summit with Sean Perez at Frasca because Jeremy was off. Tonight I'll be working at Osteria Alberico after I finish up with some meetings here at Sunday Vinyl. So my day job is a night job. And then I also fall into an interesting hat where I'm also an importer and a winery owner with Lachlan McKinnon Patterson, my business partner. We started, 17 years ago with just making about 150 cases of, back then we called it Tokai Friulano. And maybe I should have said our first restaurant, Frasca Food and Wine, is based on the cuisine of Friuli, Venezia, Giulia. And that company, Scarpetta, is 100,000 cases now, distributed in all 50 states, in Canada, in the Latin Americas. And this year we also launched within Scarpetta a small import portfolio called Benvenusa, because we've helped so many Friulano families find importation here in the U.S. We thought we will continue to do that, but also help some family wineries that have reached out to us that have never been in the U.S. Maybe we're a good fit for them. So we have about 5 wineries currently in that section.
Wow, very cool. And Bobby, why this concentration on Friuli specifically?
Well, when we started Frasca 20 years ago, I come from a on-the-floor sommelier. I was wine director at the French Laundry, and before that, the Little Nell. And I fell in love with those wines, and I fell in love with that region, and I could not have been more lucky to have that as our North Star, because it's just given us so much pleasure.
Absolutely. And it's exciting to hear just how much Scarpetta has grown, 100,000 cases. Congratulations. It's a huge accomplishment. And now that you're branching out into the import side as well, that's really exciting.
Yeah, we feel very lucky.
Yes, absolutely. So in today's episode, as much as I'd love to chat about Friuli, I do want to talk a little bit more specifically about the role of wellness in the wine industry and how industry leaders like yourselves are setting some great examples for all the rest of us to follow. So our takeaways and what we really want to focus on today's masterclass is number one, the increasingly important role of the integration of wellness into the beverage alcohol industry as professionals, but also as we communicate to consumers. Number two, how different hospitality and beverage companies are incorporating wellness into their businesses and with their employees. And finally, there's a lot of runners in the wine industry, myself included, and of course yourself too. So what do we think running and wine have in common, and why it's attracted so many beverage alcohol professionals? So for starters, Bobby, tell us a little bit more about your own individual approach and philosophy to wellness. I know you have a background in cycling before getting into wine. So just tell us a little bit more, about your journey as it relates to fitness and wellness.
Yeah, well, my journey, I started bussing tables in 1983 as a young punk rock dyslexic kid. But I was already a runner because my parents, I don't know how, but got me running 10Ks when I was like 7 years old. And my family has an endurance sports background. And then, yes, you mentioned I was a former domestic pro cyclist and an amateur in Europe in the late 80s, early 90s. But all the while was when I was in restaurants. And I early on, and I'm so honored to be on this show because I'm very passionate about this. And a lot of times my passion about this subject falls on deaf ears with journalism or coworkers or employees. Is literally in the mid 90s, I was working at the Little Nell Hotel, and I'd already had a career in the restaurant business. And one thing that I thought was not sustainable, even back then, was the gluttony excess of our beautiful industry, the restaurant industry and the wine industry. I really saw it as a young professional as this is not how we should be living. I love this industry so much. I want to do this forever. And I saw people complaining about the stress of the restaurant industry. And I really realized early on that that's not the way. And obviously, I had a background in this, but when I went to go work at the Little Nell, I was coming out of being a domestic pro cyclist. I had finished that a couple of years before, and I was not fully back into working out like I started to again at the Nell, just because I maybe had been a little bit burnt out, maybe a little bit. And I was starting my career at the Little Nell, and I'm like, I'm going to re-engage. I didn't have time to ride as much, but I brought running back in, and I really said, wait a second, this is what we should be doing to have longevity in this beautiful career. And I was studying to be a Master Sommelier. I was working at the Little Nell as, at that time, one of the sommeliers. I ended up becoming the wine director there. But I was just like, I think, and it was right at the time period where food journalism started. That was when we were writing these very prolific pieces about people like Marco Pierre White, talking about him doing cocaine. And it was all about the bad boy chef. And that went on way too long. That really started in the mid 90s. And I really didn't believe in it. I thought it was, there's no way this is right. Is it happening? Yes. Is our food journalists trading in 70s rock stars for 90s chefs? Yes. And I didn't think it was sustainable. And I really just on my own really tried to add that balance in. And I remember every year during the Aspen Food and Wine Classic, which is one of the busiest weekends at the Little Nell, I would wake up every morning and make sure I would do an 8 to a 10-mile run before my shift, just to center myself. And then I started realizing in around 1999, I stopped going out after work. And I want to be really clear. I'm not a teetotaler. I love balance and I love wine and beer and spirits. I love it. And it's very much a part of my life. But I also realize I want to be excellent at work. And to be excellent at work, excellence, if you're getting a grade in high school or college, is 90% and above. And you can't be 90% and above if you show up one of your 5-day work weeks not being laser focused. If you're kind of banged up, And the best you're going to be that week is 80% if you ace the other 4 days. So believe it or not, I stopped going out after work in 1999. Mind you, I was at the time in my late 20s in Aspen, Colorado, a town notoriously known for late night activity. And I said, I'm going to stop going out after work.
Wow. You recognized it quite early on, it sounds like, Bobby. I mean, I imagine your background and your upbringing, your childhood had something to do with this, but it sounds like from quite early stages, you recognize this need for more balance, in the hospitality industry.
Yeah. And Juliana, I did. And I just worked with myself. But the funny thing was, I have mentioned it to people forever. And it really, for a long time, fell on deaf ears from food journalism. And you're just now getting to see it. I saw that great article in Wine Spectator this year about winemakers and people in the industry doing positive things. And to close this loop, I remember running the New York City Marathon, might have been '08 or '09, with Daniel Hume. He and I ran it together, went to the start together, and I couldn't believe there wasn't more attention on Daniel Hume running the marathon. But Eater that week had a piece on a chef, I'm not going to say his name, but having a kegerator on the line. And I'm like, really, this is how we want to spin journalism? And so, yes, that's a long answer, but holy moly, I think this is so important. And I want to get to the top of the mountains and scream this to everybody that this is, trust me, it works.
Right. And I think what I hear from you, Bobby, is that integrating it into your career early on can have a lasting impact because it's something you did from a young age and you're still doing today. So, how do we educate and inform and imbue this sense of responsibility into the industry to recognize wellness, to incorporate exercise, both physical, but also for your mental wellness into the culture, right? What I was curious about was when you're in your late 20s in Aspen and you not going out after work and you're running before your shifts, like what were your coworkers? What did they think? Like, were they, getting kind of like made fun of and being called a nerd, or were they like, oh, that's just Bobby? Like, how did people, like your peers, react?
No, I don't think they reacted. I just said, I'm not going out tonight. I didn't make a big deal about it. I just quietly fell off that. But I was doing trail running races and things like that. So they just assumed, oh, he's got a hard run the next day.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't like wear it as a badge. I just made it what I did. And I would still, on my night off, go have dinner with friends and drink great wine or have a good time. But just taking that out after work, it gave me so much more energy. I became so much more measured and precise in my work. It just made sense to me. But I never went like said, hey guys, I don't go out anymore. It also helps that if you're trying to do something like train for a race or whatever, you got to have some process involved. And people just, oh, he probably has a workout tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. And Bobby, now, you're running multiple restaurant programs, Scarpetta, new import business as well. How have you incorporated wellness into your routine now that you have what I imagine is an incredibly busy schedule? You mentioned earlier you're on the floor too. So how do you maintain your exercise habits with such a chaotic schedule?
Well, I think any schedule, doesn't matter if it's your exercise, if it's time with a loved one, whatever, recharge, or just getting your work done. As you grow in responsibility, and many of us do, you have to find ways to prioritize things. And for me, you have to look way, way in advance. And I think doing a marathon, locking in to do a marathon, is not unlike locking in to study for the Master Sommelier exam. You've got to carve out time. And so a marathon, normally I like around 16 to 18 weeks of prep for a marathon. I'm kind of like a diesel engine. I'm a little bit bigger for a marathon runner. Takes a while to get in shape. This year I had a hamstring injury and I got kind of truncated to about 13 weeks. But still, even on a truncated version, I've looked at every week that I have for 13 weeks, 12 weeks in advance and kind of plot it out. Oh my God, if this meeting gets put at this time, what time do I have to get up to do this? And running a marathon, like if you're going to run it hard, whatever hard is for you, if you're Eliud Kipchoge and you're trying to break the 2 hour barrier, or you're a slower runner, an enthusiast, whatever you're challenging yourself, you can't just run. You have to do certain workouts. You got to have a long day. You have to have a second long day. You have to do some intervals. I'm already looking at what my travel schedule for Scarpetta is in September and October, and knowing where I could plot certain runs to make sure it works.
A lot of planning, a lot of organization. And, I know myself, I'm similar when I'm training for a marathon. I've got Berlin coming up in 6 weeks. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm excited. And I'm going to a friend's house later. And she said, I've got some Pet Nat in the fridge. And I said, I'll be bringing my NA beer because I have my long run tomorrow and I want to feel fresh.
So is this your first Berlin?
My first Berlin and my fifth marathon.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for you. I love Berlin. And it's really like, not to stereotype, but it is pretty freaking organized. I mean, it is a major that getting to the portalet is pretty easy. Like you can walk to the start from many hotels. Big fan.
Good to know. Good to know. Bobby, I want to talk a little bit about this shift we've seen because you mentioned, late 90s, early aughts, the media is covering the rock star chef and that's really what was in the headlines. And we know how powerful media is to impact reality, right? It's undeniable. But we've seen in the last 3-4 years a shift in the headlines. You mentioned the Wine Spectator story, but so many countless articles around wellness, not just around alcohol, but just in general. And then at the same time, we've also seen some more negative headlines around the impact of alcohol on your health and wellness. So, for starters, what do you think caused maybe the shift in the wine media or the media around beverage alcohol and restaurants to start covering the topics of wellness and mindfulness and exercise more regularly? Like, where do you think we saw that shift and why?
I think media kind of dodged a bullet because I think media was really intertwined with a lot of that party boy chefs. And when that Me Too thing happened with a lot of big name chefs, I guess, what was that, 2016, 17? There were a lot of articles, that there's the John Besh piece, there was the Mario Battal, all those pieces. And I don't even have to mention the chefs' names. We all know what happened. But if you think about a lot of those people, they were really in the solar system socially of a lot of journalists. I think it was like time is up about writing articles about that anymore might not be a good idea. That's my thought. And then, they've got to look for something else to write about. Well, thank God it was about positive things. And, there's a lot of articles about mental health and things like that. But eventually we started seeing some really good articles, which is great, but really good articles about adding balance in. And I just want to echo this. I'm in my mid 50s and I'm still on the floor. It is a great industry. Wine is a great industry. Just don't make it harder than it has to be. And I think a lot of the pain in our industry is self-inflicted. And so I love when journalists can write about positivity stuff because it's just so good.
Just don't make it harder than it needs to be. Those are great words to live by and a great philosophy, I think, to take forward as we look at the industry. Bobby, are you seeing other companies out there, in the wine hospitality industry, restaurant groups, wine companies, et cetera, that are incorporating maybe health wellness programs for their employees? What are you seeing out there around this topic?
You certainly do. I think you see it so much. I used to live in Napa Valley, and that it was not, when I lived there 25 years ago, a really big piece. But now you see Napa Valley wineries having bike rides with their team. I do an event that Daniel Janis has brought me to. I did not get to do it this year, but I've done it a few times. It's a fundraiser over in Burgundy, and they've done it in Burgundy and Bordeaux, and with different sommeliers and chefs from around the world. And I love seeing the Harlan family estate bring their whole team over to that. And the camaraderie, I tell Will, I'm like, geez, man, what great energy. And they're riding these hard routes. It's awesome. So you see that. And, obviously I spend a lot of time in the Italian wine aesthetic. And, me getting to run with winery or ride bikes with winery or restaurant people in Italy is really something I didn't used to get to do. Like John Venica and I will get some really soulful runs in the hills of Collio together. There's an importer distributor in Colorado, Craig Lewis. He's a former stage winner of the Giro d'Italia. And when he takes his team over to Italy, he's running with different winemakers. It's amazing.
That's so cool.
It's really cool. Now, I don't recommend, unless you're really ready, to go out for a run or a bike ride with Craig Lewis, unless you're really ready to do that. I've been a
Yeah.
victim of that. I will be tomorrow morning.
Wow. Well, good luck. You better get to bed early tonight. But I like, Bobby, what you said about incorporating running and, cycling while you're on those supplier trips or visiting partners abroad. I mean, have found myself so often on these trips where it feels like you never move and you go from car to winery to dinner and there's, very little time incorporated to get movement in. And I think what a great way to incorporate that movement into the socialization and the time you're spending together with your partners abroad. And my next question was going to be, how, as many of our listeners are living in Italy, working for Italian wineries, how should Italian wineries, when they're coming to the US and doing market work or market visits, be thinking about this topic, or maybe be looking to incorporate wellness and exercise into the work they're doing in the market?
Well, it depends on what they want to get out of it. But one thing you can do, and I've done this, is send an email to your distributors. Hey, is it anyone's a runner? Does anyone want to wake up with me and go for a run? Show me the sites. It's amazing. There's always a few people. And then one thing I do, and it goes back to the planning thing, is look, there's so many tools now. Like, okay, let's say I am going to, let's just pick a city. I am going to Toronto for Scarpetta to see our distributor. I'll choose a hotel close to the lake that I can jog to and get a run in. And when I'm in any city, if it be Los Angeles or New York, I will choose my hotel kind of based on what I want to accomplish for those mornings. And they might have different needs. If I'm traveling on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can't really move my threshold workout in, I would probably want to be close to a place where I can do something like that or whatever. And using Strava or Map My Runs, you can find anything anywhere nowadays.
Totally. Yeah, there are so many tools. As the saying goes now, if you don't post it on Strava, you didn't do your run. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly. Well, Bobby, this was such an interesting conversation, and thank you again for sharing your personal perspective and journey on this topic. As we wind down, we'll do our rapid fire quiz we do at the end of every episode. So if you can do your best to answer these questions in just about one or two sentences. Question number one, what is your number one tip for mastering the US wine market?
Yeah, for Italian wineries, it's just planning your visits. Remember, we have a different responsibility as Italian wineries, is that you got to work with your distributor to make sure they're showing you to the accounts that are most in love with Italian wines. There's nothing worse than when it's a day of work with not planned out properly and you're just seeing restaurants that are A accounts, but not maybe A Italian accounts.
Right. Okay. So a lot of communication with your partners and planning ahead. What is something you might have told your younger professional self about working in the wine industry?
I think the one thing I would have done differently as a young person when I was first entering the wine industry would be find a mentor that you can touch base with. Actually, I did this a lot, but they even more so, like someone that can hold you accountable as a mentor. You don't necessarily need a cheerleader. You need someone to say, "Are you doing this? Are you holding yourself to those standards?"
Right. I love that. So find yourself an accountability partner in your mentor. And finally, we talked a lot about travel and planning, but what is your favorite travel hack when you're traveling for work?
Favorite travel hack is to take a couple empty water bottles with me, and I come with the single servings of Scratch Lab, and then they don't have the single servings for the recovery mix, so I just bring those in plastic sandwich bags and have a little bit of fuel with me, and I bring some instant coffee mix in case there's not a coffee maker in the hotel. If I have to get up really early to get a run in before I get picked up, I need to have everything right there when I go to bed. Water bottle for the morning, a little bit of coffee, maybe have some almond butter or something like that, so I have a little bit of food, just so I can make sure I don't have to go track down a coffee shop or go to the hotel restaurant if I got to think about those things ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bobby, thank you again so much for joining us today on the Italian Wine Podcast. How can our listeners connect with you and follow along with you?
You can come see us in one of our restaurants at the Frasca Hospitality Group. I'm on the floor, so you got a good chance of seeing me there. Or you can connect with me on, my Instagram is just Bobby Stuckey MS.
Perfect.
Or you can just reach out to me at one of the restaurants.
All right. Thank you again, Bobby.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you've enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.